All right. So, Peyton, here we are introducing an episode that I think kind of blew both of our minds a little bit because we didn't really know exactly what getting into. So, just to give a little bit of background, Peyton sent me a message about a guy that a mutual friend of ours, whose name is Friend, had mentioned to him about a successful group practice that was going on out in Spokane, Washington, and the guy just happens to be on my friends list. I always just add dentists whenever they come up on Facebook, and I messaged him and said, "Hey, it sounds like you need to be on our little podcast segment." And man, I was just really blown away by it. How about you, Peyton?
Yeah, it was honestly incredible, and I had gotten a little bit more information about him than I told you, but even then,
Thanks.
I still was impressed just with all the stuff that he's been able to do in a relatively short amount of time. And I think it's also cool to hear. I feel like a lot of people that do bigger group practices go for the associate model, where he kind of sticks more to the partner model. So I don't want to give away too much of
Yeah.
it, but I did think that part of it was really interesting and unique.
Yeah, no, to the listeners, you will kind of notice that I did not really understand his situation or the scale of it going into the interview. And I was kind of figuring it out as we went along. And as I grew to appreciate what he's got going on, I was like, man, I really did not know what we were walking into. So I think that's enough as far as the intro is concerned. I'll let you guys enjoy. I mean, this is a real treat. So that's Dr. Josh Cochran.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Pursuit of Ownership. It is Peyton here, and we have an awesome episode for you guys today. I'm really looking forward to this one. So, what we have here is we have a doctor that has had a very successful, big single location. And I just think it's really cool to hear from doctors that are in that situation because there's not a ton of them out there that are having, two, three, four in the same office. So I'm just really excited to hear what he has to say for us today. And also, we have Tyler, of course. Tyler, how you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. It's good to be back on the mic, and I'm pretty excited about this one too. I get a lot of questions from listeners about having multiple providers in the same location, setting up partnerships, and how equity gets shared, and how you can use that to grow larger groups and all kinds of stuff. And people talk about multiple practices. Sometimes they talk about larger group practices. But our esteemed guest today is a pretty good example of what can be done in one location with a lot of chefs in the kitchen. And I'm really curious to see how he makes that work.
Absolutely. So yeah, without further ado, we'll introduce Dr. Josh Cochran. Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm great, guys. Glad to be here. It is my pleasure and my honor.
Tell us a little bit about what you got going on, and whatever details you're willing to share. Some about your journey and how you got there, that kind of stuff.
The origin story.
Yes, of course. We the story is important. We're all about the vision and the story, and, the narrative.
Because I think most of your audience base, students are a large portion of them.
A large portion, yep.
Yeah.
Students and newer grads mostly.
Okay, so I'll probably start a little further back just to be a
Sure.
little more relatable. So, went to business school because I wanted to conquer the world, and I kept did 5 internships in business school in downtown Seattle. I kept getting stuck in cubicles, and I was like, "Is this it? Like, this is brutal."
Oh, that's
So,
great.
I found from working all those jobs, I came up with a list of 10 things I wanted in a job, and started looking at everything. Working at Blockbuster, you name it. And then I ended up following my childhood dentist, and it hit most of the boxes. The other thing that hit most of the boxes was commercial real estate development, but I had no money, no contacts.
Right.
So dentistry seemed like a clearer path for me.
Sure.
So ended up tacking on a couple years of science, and ended up going to AT Still in Arizona, and had a good experience there. And I still had that entrepreneurial drive though. But I also had a strong family tether. So even though I've been gone 10 years, Europe, I lived in Denmark for a year,
Wow.
lots of different places. I really wanted to be around family. So I moved back to Spokane, Washington, the home of the Gonzaga Bulldogs. We're finally good. I mean, we've been good for a while, but
Oh,
they're
that's
a
great.
good team this year. So we get excited about that. We don't have a lot of local sports. Um, so moved to Spokane, and I wanted to, get reach my vision as quick as possible. So I want to learn from people who had great practices. Well, I worked for two wonderful dentists, very, very sweet dentists, very good quality clinicians. But what I realized was their success was built over 25 years. So they weren't innovating, right? They weren't doing anything that was different that was gonna lead the next 20 years. They were doing the same things they've been doing for 25 years, but they were good relationship people, good communicators, good quality of dentistry, and that's why, they were successful. They both had about 1.2, $1.3 million practices. When somebody has that level of practice, we all have our different gauge on how we look at things, but I would call those solid practices, right? You
Mhm.
can't you can't get there unless you're a solid clinician and a solid person, uh,
Right.
or a solid communicator. So after working those jobs at first, um, what happened was I caught up on their extra patient flow. This was what is that, 2010, so coming out of the recession. But they weren't really aggressive on the business side, so there wasn't enough growth for two dentists, right? So this is a story I hear all the time. Dentists who reach
Oh,
out
yeah.
to me like, "Oh, I joined this guy. He said I was going to be able to buy in, and then it didn't work out." I mean, I've heard the same story 1,000 times, right? And so that was the big challenge there. They didn't have like a strong marketing platform, a strong plan to grow the practice to accommodate two dentists. So both of those jobs, I left amicably. Those were awesome guys. Then I worked for a small to medium sized DSO up in Washington a little bit, and income started going up, right? Like first couple jobs, you're like, $600 a day, $800 a day. You start gaining skills, you start doing more. I mean, I think I made like 60 grand my first year, right? Because I wasn't focused on the money, I was focused on the growth and learning, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But like between student loans, like that doesn't pay for anything, right? That's just
Yeah. Doesn't leave a lot on the table.
taxes and student loans maybe in a year, right?
Right, right.
Uh, so so then I worked for a small DSO. One of my friends was becoming the head of that DSO, so I started working for him for a little while. But I still had this entrepreneurial itch, right? Like I still had my dream to pursue, and so I started looking, expanding my vision. Started looking across the country, seeing what other people were doing, as opposed to what people were doing in my local area. So I started connecting with some different folks, got excited about it, and decided to just like jump in. Right, I'm young. I didn't have kids at that time. I was dating a girl from dental school. She was a couple years behind me, but that was getting pretty serious. So I was like, well, now or never, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's
Awesome.
similar to Ty's situation, right? Ty's just going to jump in, right?
That's right. That's
Um,
right.
and I think if you have that entrepreneurial itch, doing it yourself is definitely the hard way, right? When people ask me what it's like owning a dental practice, I'm like, it's waking up every morning and eating glass. You just have to have tough conversations and deal with tough things, right?
Yeah.
Employees or budgetary issues, right? It's not easy. But if you have grit, the number one success factor of folks is grit. So if you just fight through it, eventually, and you continue to focus, right? Eventually,
Yeah.
you will emerge successful. The obstacle is the way.
Love it.
Do you want me to get kind of into the specifics of our startup?
Yeah, so I wanna start, and by the way, that was a wonderful synopsis. I love a lot of the things you had to say about, grit and waking up with the glass. I mean, that's great. So you keep referencing what your vision was and how that was something that, you were starting to get moderately successful in this DSO, and it just kinda kept nagging at you. You had this vision that you wanted to realize. Can you kind of, elaborate as to what that vision was and kinda how it evolved through this process?
Yeah, so I think it's both internal and external. So on an external point of view, I
Yeah.
want to modernize dentistry, right? We all get used to things like Amazon and Apple and Starbucks, and you're like, why isn't dentistry like that, right? It just
Yeah, of
feels
course.
wrong.
Yeah.
So there's
Right.
that external drive. I think some people have this. As you guys continue to develop yourselves and learn about yourselves, I do a lot of self-reflection and understanding. One of the things about me is I have to continuously improve things around me, improve systems, improve people. It's just who I am. So that was nagging at me. The second thing is, I always try to have an internal locus of control, right? Everything around me, is under my control. My own self-worth, I try to base it on who I am, not external factors. But there
Right.
is a part of me that wants to prove to myself that I can do it, right? Like I just need to be like, yes. I mean, that's part of who I am innately. And
Right.
so those two internal factors were pushing at me, and then those what drove me to commit to a startup.
Okay. Very nice. Yeah. And what as far as, you mentioned you did the startup. So did you look into, acquisitions, or, was startup really something you had to do because it was sort of like that ground up, that entrepreneurial drive that you had? What really drove that decision?
Yeah, I think that was it. I wanted to really have a clean slate and build something beautiful. I
Right.
think there's another part of me, like as you get older, you start to look back and you're like, wow, I've been like this my entire life, right? So the reason the second thing that I was interested in was commercial real estate development. There are things about me that I really enjoy. One is building things. I love creating, building, and so that's why a startup appealed to me. I wanted to build something awesome.
Okay. What was the model you were going after as far as like the size of the office, and what kind of care were you going to be providing? How many providers, stuff like that? Was that really solid early on, or?
No, so I think you have these self-limiting beliefs, these glass ceilings you place in your own head, right? And
Yeah.
so at first, it was just build a great practice, just me.
Right.
There was no vision for other doctors at first.
Okay. Okay. Very well. So what exactly did you get into? So once you started this practice, how did things get off the ground?
Yeah, it was brutal, Ty. It was brutal. So, so the whole startup
Oh,
process
that's great.
probably took, oh my gosh, like 12 months, right? Finding the location, negotiating the lease,
It's
TI.
actually not bad. That's not
Yeah,
bad.
okay. So, I mean, it takes forever,
Yeah.
right? And so you're
Right.
like,
Yeah.
wow, it takes forever. And then you get started, you have this vision of, oh, everything's gonna be great. But like, dude, I think I had like, I don't know, 28 patients first month, right? When I had time on my hands, so I started getting into hybrids, learning how to do hybrids. And
Right.
that like kind of supplemented the income for the first 6 months a little bit. But that first year I made no money, right? At all. Just nothing. I reinvested everything back into the practice. And then you don't know anything as a leader. I mean, you try to learn, right? You read books and stuff, but until it's in practice, it's a tough learning curve, right? You have team members like sign up to work and then miss 50% of their days the first 4 weeks, right? And then when you're a small team of 4 or 5, missing one team member is brutal on the rest of the team, right? Um, so that's one challenge. I mean, you hire people and they steal your sedation meds, right? And they take them home, right? A little later on in year two, I mean, we had embezzlement. I mean, there's just so much stuff. I mean, one of my favorite story. Have you guys ever heard? You guys ever met Tim McNamara?
I've seen him speak before. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Tim's got the best story. He had two team members husband swapping out in the parking lot, like having sex with other team members' husbands in the parking lot. I mean, in his first
Oh
year
my
out of school. I mean, this
gosh.
stuff like
Yeah.
happened, and you're just like, "Is this what world am I living in?" Where you have to deal
There's
with that
like
stuff.
no way that you could possibly ever like prepare for that. Like, and that's kind of what we say too. It's like you can read all the books, you can listen to all the podcasts, but at the end of the day, you just have to be a good problem solver. You have to just think on your feet and do whatever you can.
Absolutely. You, your income in life is directly proportioned with to your ability to solve problems. Um,
Yeah,
the bigger the
absolutely.
problems, the bigger the income. I would say to your listeners.
That's great.
One of my best friends, Abe, went to go try on some loops with Q Optics, and he sent me a text of his angle of declination from the side. So there's this picture of him with his old loops on, and then a new picture with the Q Optics loop on. His question was, is it really this big of a difference? It was about a 15-degree difference in how far forward he was having to angle his head. He's going from with the Q Optics loops on, he had almost like a slightly forward neutral head position. With his old loops, you could tell he was leaning his head forward and was having to strain his neck every single day to do dentistry. So to answer the question, is it really that big of a difference? Yes, absolutely. 15 degrees, it's huge. He was blown away. He's loved them. I've loved them. You should try them out. If you want to test run a pair of Q Optics loops against your old loops, email sales@qoptics.com and include the promo code SP19 to get a discount off your loops and light combo.
So you said it was about 12 months for you with the startup. Along that journey, what do you remember specifically what parts you kind of got hung up on or what parts were more difficult? Because I feel like here we kind of advocate for, buying an already existing location, but recently we've become more warm to the whole startup process. So for you, what parts did you find difficult?
Yeah. So comparing startup versus acquisition too it really comes down to team members, right? There's pros and cons to that. I was able to bring on a hygienist that I taught a little at the school, and I was able to bring on the hygienist that I thought was by far the most outstanding team member from that hygiene school. And she's still with me 6 years later. She's one of my leads. She's amazing. So you have that opportunity when you do a startup, right? But on the flip side, you hire all these new team members, and you don't know anything about hiring. You don't know anything about growing people, about holding people accountable. So you're really dealing with a lot of challenge there. When you acquire a practice, you have team members, depending on the success of the practice. If it was a successful practice, you have some well-trained team members typically, which kind of help you. It gives you a sense of what a good team member looks like, right? But that also comes with challenges, right? They're going to challenge you, and you have to be able to address those challenges too. So, and if the culture isn't good, now you've got a real problem. So I think the whole startup versus non-startup debate really comes down to your skill set. If you've got a great skill set, a year in, you're going to be very successful. If you don't have a good skill set, then acquiring might be a better option, because at least there's some good skills around you to help support you on your growth at the beginning. But to me, you got to take a step back, Peyton, and look at where you want to be, right? And so, Peyton, you want to be in a large practice, right? You want to be part of a large practice, right? And so, doing a startup or buying a practice, those aren't the quickest paths to having a large practice, right? The quickest path to having a large practice is finding somebody who's just crushing it in a large practice and joining that large practice and learning it from the inside, right? You're going to learn 3 times faster with less stress and have more income joining one of those practices.
Okay, awesome. So you've gotten to the point where you did your you start up, and you said the first year was a little bumpy. So at what point did you kind of start seeing that start rewarding you for all the effort you were putting in? And just kind of, I know you brought up the first year. What did it look like after that?
Yeah. So towards the end of the first year, I was like, this is it. Like, no money, like so hard. I'm working my butt off. So I actually looked into selling to the DSO that I'd worked for before. I was like, dude, there's got to be something better. That ended up not working out. And so it was the best thing that ever happened to me, right? So I was just like, well, I guess I just got to dig deep and keep at it. And so I did, and continued to eat a lot of glass. And
Right.
I think year 2, I don't know, like 1.8 million or something was our revenue. So, even though the first year was so hard, what I didn't realize is I was on a rapidly escalating upward trajectory, right?
Okay.
I just thought it was in front of me, not the future. So yeah, so we ended up doing about 1.8 million. I mean, there's still a lot of team challenges, right? Like, I had no idea what I was doing, right? I went to business school, it doesn't matter. Like, no idea, right? I had that great hygienist team member, she was awesome, but
Yeah.
everything else, you're just learning as you go. So once you're doing about 1.8 million, I mean, most doctors get maxed around 1.5, right? 1.5 to
Right.
1.8.
Right.
So, I was the bottleneck in my own business, right? Every decision was going through me, right? And it feeds your ego, right? Because everyone's always asking you questions and you feel great, but it doesn't help you get where you want to be because everything goes through you, right? The things aren't growing fast, right?
Right.
And so I got to the point where I was like, well, I guess I, need to bring on another, either cut insurances, right? Or bring on another dentist. And then you got to go back to your core value system. Who are you? And essentially, I'm a growth person, right? You're either growing or you're dying, right? What's the point of life? It's, for me, it's growing as a father, growing as a husband, growing as an entrepreneur, growing as a dentist. Like, it's about growth. And so it was a pretty easy decision for me to add another dentist. Well, just like you guys, you start looking at what are the business models out there, right? I could have associates, I could have partners. Like, what do I want to do? Well, I always grew up playing sports. I was always very collaborative. I love people. I love helping other people, mentoring other people. So for me, um, again, the decision was pretty easy. I was like, okay, I'll do partners. So I just started researching. I started listening to podcasts. I started reading books, like everything I could find on dental partnerships. Nothing was like a perfect fit for what I wanted, but I took pieces from all of them. And then what's interesting is once you start doing things on your own and you start finding success, you start getting much more comfortable with doing things on your own. So I put out an ad and I started interviewing dentists. So I interviewed like 13 dentists, found a wonderful human being, Dr. Morgan Ball. He was working at a Comfort Dental on the other side of the state. What's wonderful about Comfort Dentists is the Comfort really trains dentists to have a winning mindset,
Mm.
because working at Comfort is very hard. You have to
Yeah.
do everything yourself, the hygiene, the treatment planning, right? So coming from if you get a Comfort dentist who's successful, then they have a lot of traits. They're going to help them be successful in your practice. So but part of this was
Okay.
luck. Yeah, I interviewed 13 people, but still a lot of luck involved, right? So, Dr. Ball,
Sure.
an amazing, amazing person. He came over and joined me, and it's just been wonderful. He's a hard worker. He's a smart guy, very good clinically, very good with patients. Just a real good guy. It's been very synergistic. Peyton, I think one of your questions is the model. So, what did we end up doing? So, um, okay, so first things first is dating period, right? Yeah, things seem great, but you don't know, right? You got to date for a while, right?
Right.
Exactly.
And so that's the first thing. You got to date. Two, you got to mentor people, right? You got to invest in people. You got to show people you care, right? So I was there with Dr. Ball the whole time. And clinically, we were very similar. I mean, it was more on the business side and the partnership side and the growing a team and leadership is where the coaching came in. Dr. Ball and I both had a lot of room to grow. Both of us are natural, especially him. He's a see snake kill snake. He's a doer, right? He's hands on. He's a quick start. I don't know if you guys ever take your Colby's. You should take a Colby if you haven't. He's a quick start, so he just sees stuff and gets stuff done. Well, the challenge is if we're trying to train leaders to take over roles for us, we can't see stuff and get stuff done. We have to see stuff, put it on a list, talk about it at our weekly leadership meeting. If we just tackle
Right.
things that come at us, then we're undermining our leaders we're trying to create, right? That was a
Yeah.
very hard habit for Dr. Ball and I to break. And I think most dentists are that way.
Yeah.
Um, so, so yeah, so that, yeah, so we brought him on, and I paid my doctors from day one like a partner. So I treat him as a partner from day one. I paid him as a partner from day one. There was a little money that came out of that for sweat equity, to incentivize someone to buy in at a later date. But basically, at every stage in the partnership process, I made it a win-win. That way, it incentivized both of us to continue along the path to grow together.
Yeah.
And the other part of this is abundance mindset, right?
Right.
You can't you have to support and honor these people who are coming in, these clinical dentists. You have to. A lot of dentists, you'll still see it. I'm sure. I bet you 2/3 of dentistry is still built where the senior doctor will cherry pick all the good procedures,
Yeah.
right? Give the new dentist like Medicaid. We weren't Medicaid, but I hear it all the time. Oh, I got all the Medicaid patients, or
Yeah.
he took all the good patients, or all the good assistants. I'm the exact opposite, right? We give all our dentists like the best, like we try to help them hit the ground running, right? Like I think when Dr. Ball came in, I was working 5 days a week, right? I gave him like 2 or 3 of my days, right? And a new day, right? So I gave him like every new patient. So he got like the first 500 new patients,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
Like you have to invest and set people up for success. They have to know you care about them, right? Here's another. I have like 1,000 little mindset things, but I'll just
Bring it.
drop it to you as we go. Okay. How do you get successful in life? How do you get what you want in life? You help other people get what they want, right? And so I'm always very abundance mindset, growth mindset. I am not scarcity mindset at all. And it's very opposite of natural instincts, right? Natural instincts are, think about like caveman days, right? Like protect yourself, protect your herd. Like I'm the opposite. It's all about supporting other people and growing them. Um, I'll stop and let you guys ask questions before I keep going because I could talk for 2 hours.
No, we love it. It actually makes our job a lot easier. But there's so many things that you're saying that I kind of want to expand on. So, you talked about having researched a lot of different partnership structures and such when you were looking to bring on a partner. And we see this all the time, like partnerships that just don't work. And people, usually it's because whoever the owner doc is or whoever sort of that doc that was in place in the beginning, they're not always willing to give up as much. Like you said, you gave up, 3 days and then an additional day. A lot of people are not willing to let the new partner see, all the new patients and stuff like that. And it sounds like for you, it was, sort of showing off the bat that you were willing to give something to get something. And you were able to sort of structure this, at stages for a win-win. And I guess that's sort of like an earned equity type model. So like as he went along, he was buying in more of the practice, or what was that like?
So there are so many different ways to do this.
Yeah.
So I'll try to break them down.
Yeah, please.
That's your question, right? What
It
are
is
the ways
essentially.
to do equity?
Yeah.
So yeah, so we did a little bit of a kind of a, you can call it an option to purchase, a phantom equity, where we take a certain amount out every month. Half of that goes to the owner for sweat equity, the owners. The other half goes into an account, but it's not real. It's just it's a placeholder, and
Okay.
so every month that builds up. All right. So what does that do? That incentivizes the young dentist to buy in, because when they bought in, they either got that money in a check if they needed cash, right? And everybody loves cash,
Right.
or if they didn't need the cash, that dollar amount would come off the purchase price,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So what's the advantages for the young doctor? They're paid as an owner with a profit split from day one, right?
Yeah.
They're treated as an owner from day one. What's the advantage to the owners? Is there's a little sweat equity that goes in there, but that really just pays for like credentialing. like it's what you're really trying to do there is create an account that builds up, that creates stickiness, right?
Right.
Longevity.
Right.
If you've ever listened to the podcast Naval, he
Mhm.
owns the Golden State Warriors, like super smart guy, right? He talks about the compounding interest of long-term relationships, and I'm 100% about that as well. Like if you can find the challenges in relationships, train each other, come to alignment, it just pays huge dividends long term. Like bouncing around, yeah. If you're with a person who doesn't have the right value system, the right vision, yeah, gosh, you gotta separate integrity, those kind of issues. But if you have somebody, you have a shared value system, and you have a shared vision, if you guys aren't like in alignment, like not it's not working out, like you need to dig deep and figure out how to get that to work out, because that long term relationship will pay huge dividends for
Yeah.
both of you if you can figure that out. But in dentistry, like dentists can't by large dentistry, like dentists can't do that, right? We added kids dentistry, we're adding orthodontics, right? And no one else in town has done that. Actually, there's one Medicaid practice that has, but outside of that, no one else has. Why? Because it's hard, right? You got to get dentists aligned and seeing the value, the bigger picture, right? Which is a challenge. I mean, these are great people.
Right.
You still have to open their mind to abundance mindset.
Yeah, that's huge. I think you're really hitting the nail on the head. It's not necessarily, because we kind of caution people, on, partnerships. And we're not necessarily saying, hey, this isn't a good idea. It's just that it's just so seldom properly implemented, and there's not that much thought put into it. It's just sort of like, hey, you and I can just go do this together because we're friends, or it's just sort of built on the back of like a more of a friendship type relationship, and there's not that sort of mentality behind it.
Let me give you the cheat sheet.
Please, yes, this is what we're all about.
Somebody who's had a lot of successful partnerships, right?
Hey, there you go.
Like, we have I think we have like 10 doctors now, right?
Yeah.
How many doctors have we lost? One, right? And why did we lose him? Like, I knew it before we even hired him. But basically, great guy, got divorced. We're 2 hours away from his kids and his wife. But he's like, no, I'll just come work with you guys 3 or 4 days and I'll go home with the kids. Once sports started, right, he was missing their games, all that kind of stuff, right? I saw it. I had a gut feeling, but I'm an optimist too. So I was like, yeah, we'll work it out, right? So find somebody who has done a bunch of successful partnerships, right? Their partnerships rave about them. And then go back down to values, right? Do you share a value system? And do you share a vision? Okay. Those are the three things that people get these thoughts in their head. I'm like, guys, like, find somebody who's done a lot of successful partnerships. Like, don't step into this abyss of unknown when you're just learning. Like, follow the people who are awesome, and you will be successful.
Wow. Yeah.
That's
awesome. That's good.
Yeah, I definitely think too, like on the flip side of that, if someone comes to you that's had a bunch of bad partnerships, you're like,
should tell you something.
Is it the partnership that it's the problem, or is it you?
Yeah.
And I've had doctors come and interview with us, right? And I'm just like, this is just like the same story over and over again. I'm like, you were self-creating this demise, right? Yeah. Like, I feel for these people because this one failed partnership after another, but I'm like, you have self-created this. And I don't think I can break that cycle. Peyton, let me give you an example. Peyton, you're in Texas right now. Where do you want to settle down? I mean, you're probably open to a few places, but your heart of hearts right now, if you had to pick one place, where would you pick?
So I really like Dallas Fort Worth. That's where I am now. That's where I'm in school, and it's just a good place to be. Lots of growth here, with good people.
Okay. So, yeah, awesome. So I know a guy in Fort Worth, absolute stud, like nicest man. I think he has like 10 practices, right? That would be somebody I'd recommend. I know another guy who has one practice. He's looking to do his second. I think he has 1 or 2 dentists with him. Just such an organized, like, good individual. Like, that's just off the top of my head. I bet you I could come up with 4 guys that are absolute, like, high quality growth guys in that area, right? Like, be where you want to be, and then find the studs in that area. Like, join up with them. Like, you're going to learn so much in those first 3 to 5 years. Like I said, make more money and just not eat all the glass I had to eat, right? Like, I would never wish that on anybody. It is brutal. Yeah. I don't regret it because I learned a lot, right? Tempered the sword. It's made me who I am today, but I would never wish that on anyone either.
All right. So that's a wrap on our part 1 of that interview. I'm sure the listeners are thinking the same thing. We kind of went into it thinking we were just going to be talking about the practice and, metrics and everything like that. And little did we know we were in for just a litany of just truth bombs and great advice on leadership and vision and Josh's journey to get to where he is. And man, it was it just had so many twists and turns and nuggets along the way, and it ended up being a whole episode in and of itself. What'd you think, Peyton?
Yeah, I thought it was incredible. And the thing too that I think is super, super cool is that you can talk with someone who you've never spoken with before, never had any interactions with, lives in a different part of the country, and yet they still have a lot of the same, mindset as far as leadership, building a team. Yeah, and it's really, really cool. It's almost one of those things where you kind of know what they're going to say before they say it. Not that like all of it was great stuff, but I just think it's really cool.
Yeah, no, he definitely had some new things to say that I'd never heard of, but there's no question that he swims in the same circles that we do. I think he quoted, what is it, Jim Rohn that said it, the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around. Like, that's what we're all about, right? Or maybe, I hope I'm getting his name right. Anyway, that's just such an off-quoted quote, but it's so true, right? And this, Josh is so adamant about, he doesn't necessarily give himself all the credit, which I think he should give himself a little bit more. He's a very humble guy, but he gives so much credit to the people he's surrounded himself with, and I think that's really one of the biggest takeaways. But at the same time, he's been able to assemble that team of people, that group of friends and business partners, and I think it's his magnetism that's really propelled the growth that you guys are going to be hearing a little bit more about in the part 2 segment. But yeah, I just really loved everything that he was coming with, and it was funny. Just there's so many parallels with George and other entrepreneurial type dentists that eventually find that they find out that their strengths are not really limited to the chair, and they wear less hats and they start to focus on what their strengths really are and let other people kind of take care of the other gaps. And yeah, I was just so impressed with him, and I feel the audience probably was too.
Yeah, and he reached that point where he realized the amount that he could help people by himself versus delegating, building a team around himself. He realized just he could have such a big influence if he was able to do that, and he did a fantastic job of that, which we'll see more of in the second part of this episode here.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what he talked about, like a lot of things changed, right? Like his long-term vision didn't necessarily change, but how he was implementing it and going about it did, right? So he just started off in corporate, and then it was the startup, and then he started springing on a partner dentist, and then we fast forward to now, and there's 10 of them. But underlying it all, and I don't know how many times he must have mentioned it, was values, right? It was all about the impact that he wanted to have and the relationship and benefits that he wanted to confer to himself, to the partner dentist, to the community, and the growth that's happening at the practice level, at the group level, and at the community level that he's obviously so passionate about. That doesn't happen by accident. So I was just really impressed with all the things that underlied all this growth that he's been experiencing. So without further ado, I guess we'll be waiting until next week, and the audience will get to hear a little bit more about just what he's done out there. And man, I gotta tell you, the trajectory is just insane.